But my t-shirt is better.
At least it's older. It predates my t-shirt, I think.
Mm-hmm. I see many attendees. Alexei Safonov, Alex B. Who is this mysterious Alex B? Welcome. Alexandra Carzon, welcome. We will start in 5 minutes probably. Welcome Shane, welcome Rupa, welcome Robert and Rich. So many familiar names. Christoph, do you want to also welcome someone?
Yes, Rich. Welcome, Rich. Welcome. Welcome, Jeff. Quite a lot of people today. It's nice.
It is always interesting to try to guess from what companies all these people are.
Indeed, and what the use cases are. There's so many these days with ClickHouse. You can do so many things with it, so many different interesting data sets. Also, maybe a few people are watching this from outside, because now it's May, and at least here it's pretty warm.
So if you want to ask a question, you can ask directly in our chat. You can ask on YouTube, and Christoph will read all your questions, and I will have a chance to answer. Property trading company from Hong Kong. Very interesting. What property?
It's probably proprietary trading, like stock trading.
Maybe. Cool. Scientific paper about ClickHouse. Could you please also send a link to this paper? I want to read. I like to read scientific papers, but usually I stop after reading abstract.
I was going to say that I'm not the biggest fan of reading scientific papers, but I'll read the abstract. Like that's fine. Once it gets to the mathy bits, I'm not that good. But well, you study math, so you probably understand it better than me.
Scientific papers are always written in some language that is very difficult to understand. I don't know what is the reason. You can explain everything in simple words, but instead you write a scientific paper. Okay, it is just my rant.
Yes, it's going to be on YouTube forever. But anyway, let me know.
Doesn't matter. What about KDB or Q-like language inside ClickHouse? It is quite interesting, but also quite obscure. Not for everyone. Christoph, what do you think about Q language?
Well, because we do work with quite a number of financial firms, I did have to look into the reference a little bit. It's interesting. It reminds me a bit of like, I don't know if this is correct, but it reminds me a bit of like functional programming. Like I remember more than 10 years ago, I wrote some Haskell code. It sort of seems to be a little bit like that. I don't know. It seems, but very sort of specialized language for finance, I guess.
Yeah, and some people name it birds language, like the language how birds are tweeting, because it's too unnatural for human. Okay, so 5 minutes, maybe it's time to start.
Cool, let's get going. So hello everyone, and welcome to the ClickHouse release webinar for May. Hopefully summer has arrived wherever you are. I'm in London and the weather here is beautiful. It's warm and sunny. Anyway, as usual, Alexei will walk us through the new features and that we've added first. And after that, we'll answer questions. So please feel free to ask questions in the Zoom chat, in the Zoom Q&A box, or in the YouTube chat. And I'll be collecting them in the background and giving them to Alexei at the end. And lastly, the recording of this webinar is going to be available afterwards on our YouTube channel as well. And with that, let me introduce Alexei, the creator of ClickHouse. And Alexei, the floor is yours.
Okay, let me share my presentation. Here it is. So I will tell you what is new in the latest release 22.5. I will spend about half an hour for this, and probably we will have also some time for questions. 22.5. It is just a regular monthly release. We have these releases every month. And what is the most interesting, the most exciting in this new release? First, support for grouping sets. Let me first tell you about what do you have in group by. You can write group by some keys, but also you can write some modifiers, like group by something with totals, or with rollup, or with cube. Rollup and cube are standard SQL features, but totals is specific for ClickHouse. Specific and very convenient to use. And now we also have grouping sets. Let me try to show you some demo, and it will be more clear. So I have a server with ClickHouse, and I have multiple data sets. So I can experiment with these data sets on some queries. And I will just do some copy-paste. I like copy-paste. I do it every time. So first we will run some query with group by. It will use a data set of real estate sold in United Kingdom, about home prices, flat prices, and so on. And we will aggregate by year, by county and town. Let's check. It looks like this. Here we have county, town, London, the number of sold houses, and the average price. We can see that in year 99, in London, the average price was just £180,000. So if I will have a time travel machine, maybe it will be a nice idea to move to 1995 and buy something in London. But in 1995, I did not have £180,000. Okay, what we can do with this group by? The first and the most simple that we can do is to add with totals. And the result will look like this. We will have one additional record with the total values of every aggregate function. Total count. So the table has 26 million records. And the total average price, £200,000. And the values of keys will be default values, zeros and empty strings. What else can we do? Instead of with totals, we can write with roll up. What does it mean? Whenever we have some keys in group by clause, it will do aggregation, total aggregation, and it will return this total record, similar that we have in with totals. It will aggregate by year and return total records for every year. It will aggregate by year and county, like this. And finally, it will aggregate by all the keys. So it will iterate over prefixes, empty aggregation, aggregation by year and county, and by year, county, and town, and produce this final result. Probably you're already familiar with this feature because it is standard. Most of SQL databases have it. And let's also look at with cube modifier. How does it work? It will iterate over every subset of keys in a group by. So instead of year, county, and town, it will also aggregate by empty key and produce total record, like here. It will aggregate by year, like this, by county, by town, then by every combination of two-element subsets, year and county, county and town, and year and town. And finally, by all three keys. So every subset, if you have multiple keys, the result can be huge. But probably this is what you actually want. And what is new in ClickHouse is support for grouping sets. The syntax may look quite unusual, but it is a standard SQL dialect. You write group by grouping sets, and you list all combination of keys that you want to use for group by. So here I want to group by year. And also in the same result, I want to get aggregation by county and town. And it will produce this result. So aggregation by year and aggregation by county and town. All these records will be all together. You can sort this result. It is much like doing multiple selects with union. But you will do this in one pass. You don't have to read the table twice or several times. You can even specify empty key. By the way, interesting. Should it work? I did not test. Do you think it will work or not? Let me check. It works. And it works as expected. I can have some duplicate entries like this. I can have arbitrary number of grouping sets. So it is like a generalization of every previous modifier. I can emulate with rollup, with cube, with totals using just grouping sets. Also, you may wonder how to distinguish total records with other records. If you want to distinguish, you can just make every key nullable like this. And you will have nulls where this key is not participated in aggregation. Okay, so it was demo. Let me also review all these modifiers. With totals, we'll produce one additional record with total values. With rollup, when you have some set of keys, it will aggregate by all prefixes. Empty prefix, prefix with 1, prefix with 2 elements. With cube, will aggregate by all subsets of all combinations. And grouping sets allows you to explicitly specify what grouping sets do you want. Pretty easy. What do we miss? What we don't have? We still don't have support for grouping function to distinguish different sets when some elements may have default values or null values, but you still want to distinguish. In this case, you may want to write something like select grouping of X, and it will return 0 or 1 if this key has participated in grouping. We don't have this function. It is we still have to do it. And probably we are going to introduce a setting, rollup use null, for better compatibility, to make keys nullable by default. This is about grouping sets. What is more interesting, probably much more interesting, about new data formats for import or export. Now we have MySQL dump as input format. So here is one example of MySQL dump. You can get it from MySQL, and the question, if you already have MySQL dump, how to load it into ClickHouse? Actually, I don't recommend to use MySQL dump to load data into ClickHouse, because you can do it much more easily if you use MySQL table function. You can connect from ClickHouse to MySQL directly and just read all the data. It will be easy and fast. You can create tab-separated dump from MySQL, and it will load into ClickHouse. Tab-separated format from MySQL is 100% compatible with tab-separated format in ClickHouse. But what to do if you don't have MySQL server? It does not exist. And what you only have is just MySQL dump. You still want to import it into ClickHouse. And now it is really easy. You just use this file as input file, and it will automatically import from the first table. You can also use the setting input format MySQL dump table name to select some table if the dump has multiple tables. You can match column names or ignore the existing column names if you don't like it. It is controlled with another setting. And also MySQL dump format has support for schema inference. So you don't have to repeat column names and column types. Everything will be automatically determined and inferred. And you can write it as simple as this. So MySQL dump is just for input. We don't have MySQL dump as output format to export data from ClickHouse, because no one needs to move data from ClickHouse to MySQL. If you have your data in ClickHouse, your data is happy to be in ClickHouse. It will be much less happy to be in MySQL or Postgres, because ClickHouse loves data. Give some data to ClickHouse, and ClickHouse will treat it like your data deserves. What else about new formats? Now we have Prometheus as output format. What is the use case? So you want to monitor ClickHouse with Prometheus, or you have some monitoring data inside ClickHouse and you want to export it into Prometheus. You can use Prometheus output format with some query that will output some metrics. You can even define custom HTTP handler. So this data will be available at some path by some URL. So to use Prometheus format, you should make a query that will return these columns: name, value, type, and optionally labels and optionally help. The format will render this data like this. So it is natural for Prometheus, and everything is supported, even histograms. And Prometheus configuration can look like this. You can point it directly to ClickHouse server and make it run some query like this to get some result like this. This is a screenshot from Grafana. I hope you recognize. So now, by the way, you don't have to use Prometheus format. Why don't query ClickHouse directly using Grafana ClickHouse plugin. And recently, just a month ago, we have released a new official ClickHouse plugin for Grafana. So don't use Prometheus, just query ClickHouse directly. But if you have to use Prometheus, you can also do. What about security and compliance? When I hear compliance, my mood goes down to almost zero. I don't like compliance. But sometimes you have to do compliance just to mark some checkboxes. And thanks to Mina Ranganathan, now we have a cryptographic library that is compliant with FIPS 142. It is just one part of our SSL library, and we use boring SSL. Most of the software are using OpenSSL library, but we have migrated to boring SSL about 2 years ago because it has better track record, it has better code structure, and it is used inside Chromium and Chrome. So at least it feels more safe. And as a bonus, it has cryptographic module certified with FIPS 142. And what else for security? Now ClickHouse provides system certificates table. It allows you to introspect all the root certificates that ClickHouse can use for certificate validation. So you can check that you don't have unknown and suspicious root certificates in your system. If TLS connections don't work for some reason, you can use the system certificates table for debugging purposes. And this is probably one of the most interesting, one of the most difficult to implement new features. But now we have it. It's about memory limitations, memory usage limitations for queries. So in previous versions, there was a setting named max memory usage and another named max memory usage for user. And max memory usage was set to 10 gigabytes by default. If you look at the history, you can find that we have set it to 10 gigabytes in probably in year 2013 or even 2012. And then after 10 years, we still have max memory usage set to 10 gigabytes by default. So servers become more larger. Now it's not difficult to find a server with 6 terabytes of memory. And the question is, why 10 gigabytes by default? And since version 22.5, it is changed. We don't have max memory usage set by default. It is not set to anything. Instead, we have 2 new settings with slightly more complicated names. First is named memory over commit ratio denominator. Second is named memory over commit ratio denominator for user. Maybe it is difficult to guess what these settings are doing, but they definitely will denominate something. Let's check in more detail. So in case of memory shortage, we will calculate the ratio of memory over commit. We will simply divide the memory usage of every query to this value, and all queries for user to this value. And we will find one query that is over-committed the most. And if another query needs more memory, we will simply kill this query, that query that is over-committed. We will wait while it will free some memory, and the demanding query will continue to run. There is a setting for a time to max wait, and you can still use previous settings, max memory usage and max memory usage for user, for hard limits. So essentially you have both hard limits and soft limits. So how to explain it more simply? Not like in some scientific paper. It is to allow heavy queries to use as much memory as available. You have a server with 1 terabyte of memory. Let heavy query to use all this terabyte of memory, as long as no smaller queries will need more memory. Pretty simple, and I hope it will be very useful. Maybe previous was quite boring, but this is more interesting. It is about performance optimizations. And we have plenty of performance optimizations in every release. You may wonder, how is it possible to continue optimize ClickHouse performance? Because our competitors already stopped to optimize performance. They think that their systems work good enough. But we as ClickHouse developers never think that ClickHouse work good enough. We always find some opportunities for optimizations. And the first optimization by Maxim Kita is about performance of aggregation without group by when you use aggregate functions sum and average. Now these functions are up to 1.5 times faster. And I want to ask you, how do you think we have achieved this 1.5 times performance improvement? Any ideas? If you have any idea how it was possible, please write in chat or write in YouTube. And if your answer will be correct, and if you will be first to give the correct answer, we will send you a t-shirt. A t-shirt like this. It's quite a cool t-shirt, so please make your imagination, try to guess how we did achieve this performance improvement, how Maxim Kita has made it. I will not tell you. Another performance optimization is about arithmetic functions with one argument, like absolute value, signum, integer exponent function, negate, rounding. And these functions are up to 7 times faster, to my surprise, and also to surprise of the developer, Maxim Kita. So Maxim has made this optimization. He did not even expect that the result will be so tremendous, 7 times faster. I will also not tell you how it has been made. it is a secret. If you want to get this secret, don't worry, ClickHouse is open source. Simply find this pull request and read the source code. Maybe you will be surprised. And performance optimizations, and another performance optimizations. We have so many optimizations. And this is about just-in-time compilation for comparison function for sorting. The basic idea is simple. If you want to sort some data, sometimes you may use comparison-based sorting, but not always. Sometimes ClickHouse will use radix sort. But if you use comparison-based sorting, you may want to inline the comparator. And even sometimes you may want to do less amount of comparisons. You may want to make multiple comparisons in a batch. So many details, but the result is the following. It was about 5 seconds, and now it is 4 seconds. Plus 30 or plus 20% performance improvement. Not like 7 times, but still something. And this optimization is also by Maxim Kita. What else do we have? This is not about release 22.5, but it is so amazing that I want to just highlight this upcoming feature, just maybe in a few words. It is about vector search in ClickHouse. So imagine you want to store pictures, books, documents, music, video inside ClickHouse. But you don't want to just upload bytes, just upload images like blobs. Instead, you will use machine learning to transform these images, videos, music, text into some multi-dimensional vectors, like 100 element vectors maybe. And you want to search inside this vector space by using the distance, like the usual Euclid distance. There are multiple libraries to make this search to use indexes, like Face from Facebook, Ennoi from Dropbox, HNSW. It sounds like something not safe for work, but actually it is safe, or disk ANN. And a team of independent ClickHouse contributors have made a prototype of vector search inside ClickHouse. This prototype already showing some promising results, so I expect it to be available in this autumn. I'm not sure if you need this feature inside ClickHouse. I'm not sure if ClickHouse is a good place for vector search. Maybe you will say that, don't do this. Keep ClickHouse. Please write your comments in YouTube or in chat, and me and Chris will read, and I will respect your feedback. Okay, what else? In this month, we already launched our cloud private preview program. So we have developed serverless ClickHouse Cloud. You can use ClickHouse with no need to manage any infrastructure, no need to define sharding schema, no need to transfer data between shards. Everything is done automatically. Currently, our cloud private preview is available by waitlist. It is already being tested by multiple customers, and if you want to join, just sign up for waitlist, and we will invite you. Okay, and if you want to read the extended roadmap for this year, it is published, it is open for discussions, and we already have many of interesting discussions. So you may want to post your feedback in what directions ClickHouse should grow. Thank you, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Great. All right. So we have a number of questions on the different topics. Yeah, everybody, we have a bit of time, so feel free to ask more questions in Zoom or on YouTube, and there's a good chance we'll get around to them. But let's make a start. So I try to group them a little bit by topic. So let's start with questions on the new grouping functionality. A question from Jack: how is the total working? How does it work for group array functions? Is it an empty array, or is it values of everything?
It is values of everything. It is like you take all the records and aggregate to one record, and it will be one large array.
All right. And is there a totals plus except like syntax?
Very interesting. No, we don't have this syntax. If we will implement this syntax, maybe you will be happy, but other ClickHouse users will think, are you crazy? To make more and more strange and obscure SQL extensions in ClickHouse. But nevertheless, maybe it's a good idea. So to calculate totals, except some keys. I need to think how to represent this. How to represent this, maybe in grouping syntax. Okay, I will think about it after our webinar.
Great. And then one other question. Are there more specific plans when grouping function will be available, like before 22.8 this year, next year?
Grouping function is already in development. We already have a prototype and a pull request. So it is almost ready, and I expect it will be finished in the middle of summer this year. Great.
Let's see. So we have a question on memory overcommit. The new memory feature is really interesting. Thanks. What's your recommendation in order to keep enough memory for the file system buffer cache as well?
You can just lower the setting, server-wide setting, name it max memory usage for server, or max server memory usage. I don't remember. You can find it in config XML. And you can, by default, it is 90% of all available memory. Just set it to 50%, and it will be guaranteed you will have 50% of memory for file system cache.
Cool. And I think we just had a question come in on this topic as well on Zoom. Why implement out-of-memory killer-like functionality? Isn't it possible to use the operating system functionality instead?
The operating system will kill ClickHouse server. All queries inside ClickHouse server. That's not good. ClickHouse server will restart and continue to work, but all the queries will be killed. I just want to kill one query, and I want to kill it gracefully. What does it mean to kill gracefully? To allow this query to actually free the resources. And we will wait while it is freeing resources. Maybe we will wait hundreds of milliseconds and continue.
All right, so let's move on to the question of the day, the T-shirt question. We actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 answers, so it's quite interesting, and they're sort of different. So it's interesting. I wonder if anybody got it correct. So answer number 1 is we're reusing the sum computation for average. Answer number 2 is sum and average, you cache it or calculate each time on inserting a new record. Third answer, because the group by section is excluded, there's no need to scan one more column. And the fourth answer is that we use a dynamic runtime dispatcher to improve performance of average and other functions without group by, but apparently, yeah.
So only 4 answers. I will say incorrect, 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 and correct. The answer about dynamic dispatch is correct. We are using dynamic dispatch to use the most powerful instruction set available in CPU. So now these functions can use AVX2, AVX512, maybe AVX512, I did not check, and it gives 1.5 times performance improvement.
Great. Now the correct
could you please tell me the names? Maybe I will recognize. And if the name of person that gave this correct answer is Maxim Kita, I will not give him a t-shirt.
I think he already has one, or you can just take yours. He's probably sitting right next to you. But no, yeah, so the correct answer, like technically it comes from the PR, so I guess somebody read the PR and admitted it, which is nice, but the correct answer
That's all right. Yeah, cheating is okay.
Yes, looking at the ClickHouse code is good. Yeah, so the correct answer is from Malik Hassan.
Yeah. Malik, welcome to our webinar. Yeah, and I still have to review your pull request about logging in JSON format.
Great, so maybe you'll get a PR review and also a t-shirt. Great, moving on to vectors. Question from Alex B. For vector embeddings, do you use any indices internally?
Yes, we are experimenting with 4 or 5 libraries for multidimensional indexes. They all showing different results. We still have to choose. Maybe we will make some different options to choose between, like phase or Hanoi. These libraries have different trade-offs. One library makes index construction slower, but gives more precise results. Another library is fast, but not precise at all, and so on.
All right, and then a question from Lino, how can we test vector search?
You can just calculate the distance directly on these vectors and compare with the result if index is used. And if you get all the same results, maybe some excessive results, but at least you found what has to be found, then indexes work all right.
Great. I think he might also have meant like this new vector functionality that was implemented. Like, can people already use it? Is it already? I mean, you said autumn, right? So I guess it's not yet in the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just have a set of prototypes in the pull requests. If you are experienced and seasoned C++ developer, maybe you will have a pleasure to go into these pull requests and to experiment on your own, and maybe to help us to make them into production.
No, there's a nice little side project. Going back to memory real quick, a question from Boris. If a query doesn't fit into memory for some reason, are there any plans of optionally using disk spillover with perhaps degraded performance instead of failing the query?
Yes, and ClickHouse already supports that. You just have to enable a setting, name it max bytes before external group by, and it will spill data into disk if you don't have enough memory for group by. There is similar setting for order by. It is named max bytes before external, guess what, Chris?
External group by, but I'm seeing it on the screen. Ramazan Pollard already answered.
Okay, external sorting, if I remember correctly. Yeah, but the question is how to enable these settings to work by default automatically. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about whether to enable this settings, what values to give. And this is what we still have to implement. We want to make everything automatic by default. So memory-hungry queries will just spill data on disk instead of failing.
Yes, it's going to be a very nice feature when we have it, I think. One more question on vectors that just came in from Shane. Are vector embeddings treated differently than arrays of floats? Like, are they stored differently? Do they have their own data type?
No, they don't have their own data type, but we have optimized functions that can quickly check if these arrays have similar identical sizes in every record. So not variable length arrays, but like every time just 100 elements. And if this is the case, it will use optimized implementation of vector distance. By the way, the storage of arrays is also already very optimal. There is almost nothing to improve.
Great. All right, let's move on to a few sort of other category questions, not directly related to today's webinar. One question, early question on YouTube was, is there any reliable solution to sync data from log files to ClickHouse, where logs are from different servers? Somebody's facing issues with from Logstash with duplicate data.
Maybe it's a good idea to use Kafka table engine. There is some cases when it can produce duplicates. If partitions inside Kafka were rebalanced, then some batches may be not retried correctly. But overall, it's quite a quite useful solution. So probably just use Kafka engine. But if you want to be 100% sure you don't get duplicates, you have to, you can also use Kafka, but you have to remember the batch that you are going to send to ClickHouse to ensure that you can always retry the same batch with exactly the same records in the same order. In this case, ClickHouse will guarantee exactly one's semantic. Even if you do duplicate insert, ClickHouse will not duplicate the data. But to implement this solution, you have to store some offsets on client side. So the code that is importing data into ClickHouse has to actually remember the offsets in a persistent manner. Maybe my explanation is quite complicated. Maybe Chris, do you want to give some advice?
Yeah, like maybe to start with, one thing to look at might be, I'm not sure how good the support for writing data from Logstash to ClickHouse really is. Maybe one thing to do would also be to look at maybe some other solution for getting the logs into ClickHouse. Like, for example, there's Vector, which is fairly popular and has an official ClickHouse destination. So maybe start looking at something like that. But then, yeah, if you want truly guaranteed exactly one semantics, everything that Alexei said is true. It's just maybe a little bit more complicated. So if you don't, it's much easier to do this if you don't need absolutely always exactly one semantics. If you can relax that, it's easier. But yeah.
Actually, I don't like this answer. If you don't need absolutely, no, I don't like this. We need to make something that will be absolutely bulletproof 100% of the time. And yes, Logstash is quite slow. Replace it with Vector. It is more, at least it is more fashionable.
Yes. Ramazan also in chat is agreeing that for log shipping, use Vector. But anyway, related to sort of Kafka, there's another question about Kafka. Just somebody asking whether we have any plans to, I guess, improve insert performance when inserting from Kafka into a merge tree table.
Yes, I have a big plans about Kafka. How to make Kafka engine better. People frequently told me that ClickHouse is so good, it has Kafka table engine, it works all right, but I know that there is plenty room for improvement. So sometimes Kafka engine does not scale well. I want to make it possible to just set up importing on a cluster on multiple servers. So the workload on data importing will be uniformly distributed. I want to not care at all about rebalancing on Kafka side. I want to keep offsets in ClickHouse itself, maybe in ClickHouse Keeper, so we don't we can care about duplicates and retries on our own. There is a big room for improvement.
And maybe related sort of to this logs topic, there's a question that just came in on metrics, and the question is, do we have any plans to provide an adapter for Prometheus to use ClickHouse for data storage for external writes and reads?
Yes, it's a good idea. You can already find some adapters for Prometheus to use ClickHouse, but most of them don't use the optimal table schema, and some of them are already abandoned. So the idea is to make the proper, at least the proper recipe, maybe not necessarily some end-to-end solution, but at least some demo how to properly use ClickHouse as long-term storage for Prometheus, because I know that it can work quite well. It can compete and out-compete many other solutions. ClickHouse is good for time series. So why don't use ClickHouse in this use case?
I agree. And there's already a number of people using ClickHouse for metrics. So it's already a good use case for us. Let's see, maybe 2 or 3 more questions. We have some questions on, interestingly, nested structures. One question is, when will ClickHouse support more nested than one? I guess like nested, inside nested, I guess, data structure.
We already do. Yes, we already have support for nested inside nested. Yes, it works. What do you need? Maybe you want to just find something that will break ClickHouse. Then you may want to apply for careers ClickHouse.com as a ClickHouse QA.
Yeah. Also, maybe good to mention is the new JSON data type, which is more dynamic, so you can ingest anything, even like highly nested JSON structures. And then another question around something similar is, does ClickHouse already have support, or does it plan support for complex Avro structures like nested arrays and records?
Currently, we don't have these plans. I did not even notice any issue on GitHub with feature requests. So if you need this, please create a feature request.
Great. And then we have one question. Any hope to have some sort of hybrid partitioning this year, like different partitioning for recent versus old data? And then Jack posted a list of 3 different issues that I won't read out, but I guess we have some issues for that.
Yeah, I remember this issue. It is currently not in the plans for this year because it is quite complicated, quite advanced feature. It will be not so easy to use. The applicability of this feature is limited. Yes, I know it makes sense. It makes sense in some scenarios, but also I see many scenarios when people just misuse partitions. Imagine you have data for multiple years, but for some reason you specified partition by hour. And now your select queries are always slow. And your file system also slow. Or sometimes I see that people create primary key in the table and partition key as the first column of primary key. This is also not quite good. I want to make partitions in ClickHouse more easy to use, not more useful for advanced scenarios. But maybe we will come to this issue.
Great. Last 2 questions. One question from Ramazan. Any plan for doing mergers on SSD and then making the data available immediately on S3?
Yeah, it is quite interesting, but not obvious what will be the actual benefit. Because when we upload data into S3, we already use quite large buffers. We already use multi-part upload and parallel multi-part upload. If we will simply buffer data into a local file system and then upload to S3, the upload phase will take the same time as before. So it is not obvious what will be the benefit. But also we are going to implement, or already implemented, I forget about it, most likely we already implemented write-through cache. So when data is written, even during background merge, and if this merge is not large enough, so unless it is not large, it will be cached in local file system and you will get faster queries.
Great. And last question of the day, and I'm also quite interested in this one. Do we have any plans? What do we think about using ClickHouse for graph data, like as a graph database, I guess?
Very interesting question. And this is one of our experimental tasks. You may notice we already have pull requests for aggregate functions for graph processing. To calculate some graph metrics, like the diameter of the graph, like the number of parts of the graph, quite many interesting metrics. If you know graph theory, I recommend you to find this pull request and please write what exactly do you need.
Great. Thanks, Alexei. And I think that's all we have time for. And we're actually a little bit over time. So thank you all for staying on. Thanks for all the questions. We had a lot of questions today, a lot of good questions as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll post the recording on YouTube as well.
Thank you.